Have you ever hit the pause button to consider whether the religious beliefs you hold are actually true? How do we form these beliefs anyway, and what's our responsibility in making sure those beliefs are legit? Today on Be the 25, we're uncovering the influences that help shape our personal beliefs, and we're taking responsibility to make sure what we believe is actually true. Stay with us. It all starts in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Be the 25 podcast, the place where teens and young adults come to explore how to live the Christian life in a non-Christian world. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon O'Hara. Come join us and get your faith ready for the journey ahead. Well, welcome to this very important episode of Be the 25. Where do our beliefs come from, and what's our personal responsibility in making sure what we believe is actually true? You know, many people never take the time to consider this, but we're taking the time today. Imagine believing in something only to find out later that it wasn't true at all. Finding out that something you wholeheartedly believed in isn't true isn't a great feeling. I think this happens to most of us at one time or another. Take my husband, for example. When Steve was in elementary school, someone shouted out in class that Santa Claus isn't real. Steve had always believed in Santa Claus. And so he was very bothered about what his classmates said. So he went home and questioned his mother and with this new information that he encountered. Mom, is Santa Claus real? No, there really isn't a Santa Claus, she said. Steve started thinking, well, what about the Easter Bunny? No Easter Bunny. And the Tooth Fairy? No Tooth Fairy. My husband, Steve, will tell you he was devastated. He said it was the worst day of his entire childhood. He believed in something that wasn't true at all. Imagine believing something about God only to find out later that it wasn't true. Imagine believing in a certain religion only to find out later that religion isn't true. But before we go any further, I need to clarify what truth is so we're all on the same page. When we say something's true, we're saying it corresponds to reality, because the definition of truth is reality. It's what's real. The opposite of truth, of course, is what's false. When we say we believe in something, we say we believe that particular thing is true. We believe it's reality. But it's possible to believe something's true when it isn't true at all. And because we think something's true doesn't mean it is, nor does it make it true. And that's why we have to verify what we personally believe, like Steve did. Now, most of our beliefs, even the things we believe about God, are formed when we're very young. There are certain influences that play a huge role in us forming our religious and spiritual beliefs. And these influences affect everyone in the world in one way or another. Now, what are these influences? I'm so glad you asked. The first big influence is geographic location. Many atheists insist that geography, where a person is born and raised, can predict what that person's religious beliefs will be. And hey, our atheist friends have a valid point here. We have absolutely no control over where we're born or raised, and yet that location can shape our religious beliefs. Now, here's what I mean. If a person is born and raised in Iran, most likely they'll become a Muslim. 99.4% of the people born and raised in Iran are Muslim. If a person is born and raised in India, they'll most likely become Hindu. A little over 78% of the people in India are Hindu. Only 2.3% are Christian. If you're born and raised in Utah, there's a pretty good chance you'll become a Mormon. And that's because 69% of the people in Utah are Mormon. If you're born and raised in Hudson County, New Jersey, like I was, you have a good chance of becoming a Catholic. 84.1% of the people in Hudson County, Jersey are Catholic. So the location where you were born can play a significant role in you coming to Christ, or coming to Muhammad, or Buddha, or atheism. But keep this in mind. Just because the majority of people in an area share the same religious beliefs doesn't mean those beliefs are true. They may not be true. And that's why you and I are responsible for finding out if what we believe is true. The second big influence is family upbringing, and this is a huge one. Most parents pass their religious or non-religious beliefs down to their children. I was baptized as an infant in the Roman Catholic Church because my parents were Catholic. When they left Catholicism, though, and became Baptist, so did I. After they became Christians, so did I. Most of us inherit and adopt our parents' religious beliefs. And so religious and even non-religious beliefs and traditions get passed down in the family, generation after generation. And most of us accept those beliefs without question and without giving it a second thought. But it's to our benefit that we give it a second thought. Hopefully somebody up the family tree did the work and investigated the validity of those beliefs before they passed them down to others. But that doesn't always happen. There's a possibility that the folks could be wrong. Even those who were raised in Christian homes can get wrong ideas and beliefs about God from their parents and grandparents or other relatives. I remember when I was around 5 years old, I fell and skinned my knee at my grandparents' house. And my grandmother blurted out, "Uh-oh, God's punishing you." And my grandfather shook his finger at me and smiled and said, "Oh, that's for the next time you do something wrong." And I remember thinking at 5 years old, punish me for what? I just fell. I'm just a kid. Now, I knew my grandparents were partially kidding around when they said those things, but my grandparents did hold to the view that if something bad happens to you, God's punishing you. And it wasn't until years later when I started reading my Bible on my own that I learned God wasn't like that at all. My grandparents taught me many right things about God, but they had an incorrect view of God's justice. Now, regardless of your upbringing, it's up to you to make sure what you're influenced to believe by your family members is actually true. Now, is that wrong? No. You've got to make sure it's true for yourself so you can own it. If you find out what you were taught to believe is indeed true, it will assure you and give you more confidence in what you believe. It doesn't matter if you're listening in today and you're a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist, or any other religion. It is up to you to verify what you believe. So our upbringing can influence us to believe. Now, here's a third influence, and that is the authority figures in our lives. We usually tend to trust those in authority because of their position over us. People like our parents, guardians, teachers, a pastor or youth pastor, priest, rabbi, guru, as well as those who are well educated with PhDs. We tend to believe what they say because of their authority. Older adults and those with certain areas of expertise usually know more than we do. However, that doesn't mean we just blindly accept what they say just because they're an authority figure. God gave each of us a head on our shoulders to use too. So it's important to evaluate their credentials and what's said, even when it's presented by experts and respected people. Now, here's the next influence, and that is education. Churches, religious schools, and universities teach and promote certain religious principles. Maybe you attend a Christian school or a homeschool group or a Christian online program. They all influence us to believe certain religious things. But there's also Islamic schools and Jewish and Buddhist schools. In public schools and in secular universities, Christian students are exposed to different beliefs by fellow students and their professors, which may change their perspective on things. All these things play a part in developing our personal religious worldview. But again, you and I are responsible for our personal beliefs and for making sure what we choose to believe in is actually true. Another influence is our social environment. We all have, to some degree, this need to belong. Some people will go to great lengths to experience it. Just ask an Appalachian Trail thru hiker. The question most people ask them is why anyone would attempt to hike 2,200 miles. Many do it to experience the social aspect of the trail and to feel a part of an incredible hiking community. It's an opportunity to meet new people and make new friends, some of whom will last for a lifetime. There's a special camaraderie on the trail. It doesn't matter what your gender is or your race or the number of degrees you hold, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, or whether you're religious or not. There's only one thing that matters, and that's you're an AT hiker, and you belong. Some of you are involved in school clubs, sports, music, and hobbies, and experience a sense of belonging there. This also happens in religious circles. Church connect groups, Bible studies foster a sense of community. But so do synagogues and temples and mosques and even settings where atheists gather to meet. Our social environments are important to us, and they can place us in contact with people who can influence what we believe. Some of our friends can become like family to us. But again, regardless of their influence, it's our personal responsibility to make sure what we choose to believe is true. Now, another influence, of course, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with, is social media. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube, and all the rest are just a click away. There's a lot of information on social media and a lot of misinformation that feeds our minds, and these things can shape our belief systems. Internet and social media influencers share their thoughts, their feelings, their opinions that may or may not correspond with reality, with what's right and true. And those things can influence us. And in our next episode, I'll discuss how social media can affect our faith in good ways and in harmful ways. Now, another thing that can influence us to believe something, and it's something you might not have thought of, it's the need to satisfy someone else. Maybe you feel you have to believe what you believe because your family does, and you don't want to rock the boat. Some people want to date or marry someone, so to satisfy that person or that family, they convert to a different religion so they can be married in a particular church. Or we may hear of someone who is actually forced to believe because they were threatened. And we see this in the news, ISIS and the Taliban capturing towns and demanding people to convert to Islam or they'll be subject to a fine or be killed. So some believe out of fear of losing someone or losing their money or losing their life instead of believing out of personal choice. Another influence is our feelings. Some people believe in something just because it feels right. Our Mormon friends will say that the ultimate test for truth is an inner feeling, or what they call a burning in the bosom. A bosom is a chest that tells them that the Latter-day Saint Church is the one true church and Mormonism is the one true belief system. But should warm and fuzzy feelings be the final test for truth? What about the facts? Where do they come into play here? We have to remember, feel doesn't always equal real. Feelings can be deceiving, but some people form their beliefs solely on how something makes them feel, instead of also looking at facts. And it's up to them to make sure what they believe in is actually true. Now, here's another influence. It's mystical experiences. Some people claim to have encounters with a supernatural being or departed loved ones or even God himself. Some claim they had visions, while others say it happened in their dreams. These experiences can be very vivid and so convincing, but those experiences should never be the final test for truth. Now, we know from both the Old and New Testaments that God does use visions and dreams to communicate to people. In Genesis 28, God spoke to Jacob in a dream, promising to give him the land that Jacob was lying on. In Matthew 1, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, telling him to take the pregnant Mary as his wife. The Apostle John saw a vision and wrote about it in the book of Revelation. So from a biblical perspective, yes, God can communicate to people through visions and dreams, but he's not the only one. There are out-of-body experiences, channeling, and spirit guides that can impact a person's beliefs. And again, these experiences can be so vivid and convincing, but they can fool people. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 tells us to test everything. Here's why. The Apostle Paul explains in 2 Corinthians 11:1 that Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. People can be fooled into thinking that any experience from the spirit world is from God, but that's not true. Ephesians 6:11 tells us that our struggle is against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Back in the first century, the Apostle John wrote this in 1 John 4:1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. And there are many other warnings in Scripture like this to beware, to test, to see if they're true. So each person who has a mystical experience owes it to himself or herself to carefully evaluate that experience. Now, there are other things that influence our beliefs too that I'll just briefly mention. There's logic, which uses principles of reasoning. There's different types of evidence like archaeology that can prove something existed back in time. Even science, which uses observation, experimentation, and empirical data as a way of knowing truth, although it's certainly not the only way to know truth. And so those are the main influences. Which of these have influenced you to believe what you believe? Was it where you were born and raised? Was it your family upbringing? How about those authority figures in your life? Your education, your social environment, what you see, read, and hear on social media? Do you believe something to satisfy someone else? Do you believe because it just feels right? Have you had any mystical experiences? Have you used logic, seen convincing evidence? Has science caused you to believe something? Identifying things that have influenced us to believe what we believe gives us a better understanding of ourselves, doesn't it? But it also gives us a better understanding of those who have different worldviews. You see, they're influenced in the same ways we are, and they're responsible for finding out if what they believe is true. which leads to a very important question I want to ask you. There's a smorgasbord of different religions out there. How do you know you have it right? Because other people with different worldviews, they think they have it right too. Right now, there's a teenage girl over in India who's growing up in a Hindu family, who attends a Hindu temple each week, who prays to her many gods and believes Hinduism is the only way to God and heaven, just as strongly as you and I believe that Christianity is the only way. And she's not the only one. There are atheists and Buddhists and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and Muslims and New Agers and many others who also claim they have it right too. Not everyone can be right, though. It's actually impossible for everyone to be right at the same time. The law of non-contradiction states that two opposite views cannot be true at the same time. Christians say there's a God. Atheists say there isn't. Both can't be true at the same time. Either there is a God or there isn't a God. Christians believe there's one God, while Hindus say there are thousands of God. Well, both can't be correct at the same time. Either there's one God or more than one. Christians believe Jesus was crucified and resurrected. Muslims say Jesus was never crucified. Both can't be correct at the same time. Either Jesus was crucified or he wasn't. And today's relative ideology, which states, well, this can be true for me and that can be true for you, guys, gals, that's not even logical. It's either true or it's not true. Remember, truth is reality. So how do you know that you have it right? You're the one responsible for finding that out. You're responsible, not me or anyone else, for making sure what you personally believe is true, is reality. I'm not trying to trick you into believing what I believe. Certainly not. You have your own head on your shoulders, and the choices you make ought to be your own. The only reason why anyone should believe anything at all, religious or not, is because it's true. So make sure that you make sure what you believe is true. Well, that's going to be a wrap for today, guys and gals. Thanks so much for listening in. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend or on social media. Next time, we're going to look at the influence of social media on our faith, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And oh, it's going to be a great episode. So hit the subscribe button because you don't want to miss this one. Till next time, keep growing, keep going.